Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be hosting this LinkedIn Live today to talk about ransomware. There's lots for us to talk about and get through, but before we do, let me introduce myself and my special guest. So I'm Richard Hughes, and I head the cybersecurity division at A&O IT Group. And with me is Kevin L. Jackson, host of Digital Transformers podcast. Kevin, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hey, how you doing? Thank you very much for having me on your show. I tell you, this topic is something that is very timely. Many companies and organizations are afraid of this, so I think what we are going to provide is going to be critical as people go through into this new age. So thank you.
Absolutely. So let's dive straight in. So, obviously ransomware is not a new topic. It's been around for, sort of 30 years, the first ransomware. But I think now in, more recent years, we're starting to see, a lot more ransomware attacks. And there's a lot, I feel that people can do to protect themselves and minimize the damage should they get hit. Where do you think people should be starting?
So really, the most surprising aspect of ransomware is that the targets actually don't know their data. And this is the advantage that the malevolent actors have. Everyone sort of thinks that all data is the same, and that's not true. And companies have not actually properly classified their data appropriately. Everyone thinks about sensitivity of data and privacy of data. Both of those are very important, and you should classify your data in those two domains. But what about data type, the format and structure of data, the jurisdictional controls of the data, or the legal constraints, context of the data, sort of where did the data come from, and who owns the data? All of these aspects of the data really link to its value to your business. So some data, to be honest, you don't have to worry about losing. I mean, marketing data that maybe you use, that you want everyone to have access to, you really don't care if somebody steals it, or you can just recreate it. But if you don't know the data is marketing data versus its maybe supplier data or customer data, you don't know what you are losing with the ransomware. You don't know what the cost to your business actually is. So it's really important to classify your data with respect to these other aspects, business constraints, and maybe even the obligation that you may have for retaining and preserving that data.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of regulation around data, and I think companies have a huge responsibility to protect that data. And as you say, you can't protect something if you don't know, what it is. So, obviously GDPR in the UK is, a key point there. If you're losing data or you've lost data, you're obliged to declare that. And there's all sorts of repercussions from that. But you've got to start by knowing what that data is in the first place. As you say, sort of price list, retail price list, don't care about that. That's there front and center on your website.
Exactly.
But your employees' names and addresses, that's really important. So, absolutely. And, do you think that some companies will find this complex? I know there's a lot of different types of, data categorization you could use, but I think, for a smaller business, it's okay if they just use one or two.
So actually, even for small businesses, you need to understand things like where your data should go or how it can be used. In today's world, it's different than before, where everybody's data was kept on their own infrastructure, and the so-called infrastructure centric model for protecting your data was used. This In today's world, your data can go actually anywhere, and many organizations are using public clouds in order to hold and process their data. So you need to know where the data is going. Also, the data is not just being used on the desktops at home. Data is being used on smartphones. Data is being used on cars. Data is being used by Alexa. So you really have a hybrid environment, uh, and your people who are having access to the data have different roles. So who should have access? What devices should have access to your data? And this is really important when you think about work from home. I mean, how how protected are the networks from your employees' home when they're working at home office? That could be a very easy attack vector when it comes to ransomware.
Absolutely. I think, going along those lines, I mean, if we were using, Google G Suite, Office 365, what's the chances that, an employee is going to open their email on their own device with no protection afforded to it? You've no idea what that build is. They might download an email containing, important and maybe sensitive, business data that's now on their home machine. And is that ever going to get cleared out from there? Is that where it stays forever? And if the company, the employee moves on from that company, where's your data? It's still on their home machine. So I think that's another sort of really interesting point, of knowing where your data is, and are you really ever in control of it?
Right, absolutely. And the security controls that are in place. I mean, organizations don't know where their data is going, and they don't know unless they've done research what controls are in place to protect that data. And in today's world, as you transition from infrastructure centric controls, these security controls have to travel with your data.
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously knowing your environment as well, where your data's flowing, where it's stored at rest, I think is really, really important. We've had clients that, have been, and just to clarify, they weren't clients at the time, but they were hit by ransomware, and reached out to us to actually help them. So, the first thing we're asked for is, do you have an architecture diagram? Can you tell us what was where? What data do you have stored on these servers? And it's no, we haven't got that. They just know that, well, there's 100 servers there, and, well, this was on some of them, that was on some of them, but they don't really know what was doing which, where the data was flowing, what processes the data, where it goes on to from there. It's really, sort of interesting that I think there's many, many organizations out there that are in exactly that state.
Yeah, yes, and even worse in that your data doesn't live in the data center anymore. We are all operating out on the edge, and the most important uh, business processes are actually done on mobile devices. So the endpoint protection becomes critical. As I said before, your smartphone, what is the data encrypted on your smartphone? How about Alexa? I mean, today I can ask my Alexa to read my email. And now the data in that email that may be sensitive is actually sitting on Amazon's network somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, should your email be accessible via some of these endpoint devices? Rental car is another surprising area. I mean, when you go on travel, now that we're leaving our home now, one of the first things you do when you get off the plane is you may go get a rental car. And in today, the smartphone that you have, you want to connect your smartphone to the rental car so that you can have hands-free communications. Once it connects via the Bluetooth, the very first thing that comes up is, can the car actually download your contacts, and can the car access your messages? Once again, all of this could be sensitive information, and now your your customer list, your contact list is sitting on a rental car that you're going, and that's another area for it's right for ransomware attack.
Yeah, and I've hired, a number of rental cars. I've found data, on those devices. So, it's a real issue. I mean, I generally don't connect my, if I've got a rental car, but I always have a look and see what's in there. I've purchased a car where, the data's been left in as well. That's really interesting point.
So this is another area where training is critical. How have companies really taught their employees how to manage their data in the rental car, for instance? So, cyber hygiene is one of your best defenses against ransomware. Um, how how do you keep that at the forefront of your employees? How do you train them to recognize attacks?
So absolutely. So I mean, I think obviously, cyber awareness training is really, really important. That's something we do offer to our clients and something we certainly, roll out to our own employees. But it is not just about one training session. It's got to be, constantly reinforced. So whether you have, a message on your desktop of your machine that changes, whether you put posts up around the office that change, and the change is the important part, because if something's static and it stays the same for period of weeks or months, and you start to ignore it. And I think we've seen that we've done phishing attacks for clients, and then we've done training awareness afterwards, and then we do another phishing attack, and we can actually see the benefit of that awareness training, but it doesn't last forever. I think typically, about 6 months without reinforcement, everyone's back to exactly where they started again, clicking on the same links that they get in their email. So
yeah, I had that problem, the rogue finger problem, where something comes up, and before I know it, I've already clicked on it, and then what was that? That could have been an attack. How do you prevent that type of automatic response?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all been there, and despite where we are and where our knowledge is in the industry, we've all been there. Not necessarily for clicking on links in emails, but you might be installing a piece of software, and as you say, it might be something you've done 1,000 times, and a message comes up, but you second guess yourself. Sometimes you go, well, okay, I didn't really read that this time. I just clicked on it. What did that say? So yeah, I mean, I think if we can do it, and we're kind of should be aware, then what are other people doing? And I think it can be far worse.
I'll tell you, recently actually, I got a text message, and this is another really growing attack vector. And the text message said that we've recently had a withdrawal from your bank account. If you didn't do this withdrawal, click here. Oh, no, I didn't do it. Oh, once again, the rogue finger.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on those messages, obviously attackers are getting more sophisticated and very, very timely. So my mother received a text message the other day, and it said it was from the health service, and that she'd been in contact with somebody who had COVID-19. So she phoned me because she's pretty tech savvy, and I've got it instilled into her: do not click links. Not in emails, not in text. Do not click links. So she phoned me and said, well, I've had this text, and as it happens, my daughter was staying with her, and my daughter actually tested positive for COVID. So she assumed that it was actually because my daughter had tested positive for COVID that's why she got this message, and that's a fair assumption. Until I said to her, no one knows my daughter's staying with you. She hasn't declared that. She hasn't gone through the questionnaire with the health service yet about who she's been in contact with. So how do they know? And so, the truth is that they don't know. Um, but if you receive that message, it's the right content and it arrives at the right time, then it looks pretty good. And if you don't have reason to second guess it, you might just be clicking on that link. And particularly when it comes to your health, or as you say, your bank account, you take those things pretty seriously. You want to deal with that problem. You want to deal with it now, which I think is where most phishing attacks are going to get you. It's urgent. You need to do it now. Something bad's going to happen if you don't. And I think that people are going to fall for a lot more of this.
Yeah, my wife says, "How do they know what I'm doing?" She gets a message, and it's like it seems like they're looking through the window at me. And the truth is, they're not. They don't know what's going on in your life. They're just sending a general message to millions and millions of people. And if only 1% or 0.5% click, then they're successful. Then they have done exactly what they want to do.
And I think largely they are successful. I mean, this is it's a business. If we're honest, it's a fantastic revenue stream. You don't have to be particularly skilled. You don't have to have premises. You send out a bunch of these texts, and the money literally comes rolling in. So they're not going to stop this in a hurry.
Oh no, not at all. And once they have access to your information, now you're on the defensive, and they're on the offensive. And the next thing you know is you have to send money or transfer Bitcoin to this particular account, right?
Absolutely, and one attack leads to another. I mean, I've had the calls just as anyone will, and they've had my name, they've had my address, and this was a particular piece of software that I had a license for. In actual fact, I'd actually stopped using it at that point, and they were telling me that they're just about to take the money out of my account. Not that my license would lapse if I don't pay, but the money is coming out of my account, and if I didn't want it to now, then I needed to give them a few more details. And I hadn't actually used that piece of software for a couple of years, and I didn't have that license anymore. But they'd actually clearly the company had a breach, and they got my details, and those details just then get used for the next attack and the next attack and the next attack. And the more information they collect, then the better the next attack is.
Well, actually, I mean, companies are in business that sell contact information of people who have bought software or have bought specific services. So it's really cheap for the attackers to get that information. And the risk is really out there, or organizations need to recognize that the information is out there. And you have to balance the what you may lose with the cost or the payment. I mean, because really, one of the big questions that come up is, should I pay a ransomware? Is it more important to get my information back, or to succumb to paying? I may lose my ability to do business if I don't do. This is really a C-level topic, or to pay or not to pay.
Absolutely, and I think that's a topic we could discuss forever. I mean, my personal view is don't pay. But I have seen businesses that will literally close the doors, and they will be finished if they can't get their data back. And not just not getting the data back, but some businesses might have extremely sensitive information that just cannot be released to the public. And the ransom will be to stop the release. So it's not just to unlock your data and give it back, but it's to stop them passing it on to everyone else as well. So it's a complex issue. But what's interesting for me is that if a ransom is demanded for a person, it's illegal to pay it in the UK. So if you've got a member of your family that's kidnapped, you cannot pay legally a ransom to get that person back. but you can pay for your data. Now, I know which I'd find, more important to get back, in every case. But, it's interesting because the government are debating that here now, whether to make it illegal to pay that ransom. And I think it would have a fairly, dramatic effect in easing ransomware attacks. I won't be overnight, but, ultimately, if we can take that revenue stream away from attackers, then there's nothing in it for them. So, they will stop doing it. Maybe not completely. And, obviously, malware knows no boundaries. They may be trying other countries where it's not illegal and you may still get hit by it. But I think we should see a dramatic decrease in the UK if we were to make it illegal and people stop paying. I think on the flip side, some people will continue to pay if it's go out of business or pay, and that will be under the radar. But
well, we are really a global society now, and from a societal point of view, it's always better not to pay a ransom. But we don't have global laws or laws that can be properly enforced globally. We don't have a global government, but this is really an area where government needs to step in so it can prod society into the right direction. I mean, organizations like the United Nations should actually work to have global restrictions on paying things like ransomware.
So, I mean, in terms of, obviously the criminalization of it, is that something that is being discussed in the US as well?
Well, one of the big challenges in the US is that when you think about the United States, you think of one country. But in reality, every state in the United States is sovereign. So every state will make their own rules and make their own laws. And the federal government doesn't have any control of what a state does. And unlike the European Union, where GDPR is a common law for managing data across 26 different countries, there isn't a single national law in the United States to protect an individual's data. There's sort of a patchwork of industry-specific laws that apply nationally, and then every state may actually pass state laws that you have to follow. So while there are people in the United States that are strongly pushing Congress to make national laws in this area, sadly, we haven't gotten there. I wish we had something like the GDPR in the United States. So if we can't get to a point where we have a common law for the whole country, it's hard to see how we can get a common law to protect us against ransomware.
Understandable. So, I mean, in terms of what people can do to protect themselves, I mean, it's clearly got to be better to prevent than try and cure. I think organizations have got to be looking at their cyber hygiene. They've got to be, doing regular security assessments, a good backup with the correct retention scheme and the correct frequency of backups. Coming back to your point of, knowing your data, backing up the right things. That's things that, companies need to be looking at. Doing, in the UK, we have a cyber essentials scheme that's backed by the government that, shows that the companies are taking cyber seriously. There's a whole load of items they need to adhere to, and there's Cyber Essentials Plus, where that's actually audited. Have you got anything like that in the US, where there's a government-backed scheme for companies to just demonstrate their cybersecurity posture?
Well, unfortunately, we don't, but I think this is an area where cyber insurance can really have a part to play. where do you see cyber insurance vis-a-vis governments?
So, I mean, cyber insurance is an interesting one for me, because I think that, you know, some companies will take out their insurance, and then they won't really worry too much about protecting their data, because in the back of their mind, if I've got any losses, I'll claim on the insurance and I'm all good. And I think that, you know, makes people a little bit more complacent. Whereas, you know, if that insurance wasn't in place, then, you know, that loss is you know, considerably greater to them. And they have to think about that protection more.
So I guess government and insurance in the public sector really have to work together and really understand the importance of your data so that you can make intelligence decisions regarding whether to pay or not to pay. And it's incumbent upon these organizations to back up the right data. So knowing your data and knowing how to back it up is really important. But another area where it has changed dramatically over the years is the amount of data that these companies and organizations actually use. The bandwidth that which relates to cost that's necessary to actually back up this data, and the time needed to back up this data really points again to understanding what data is critical and what data is not. Those old days of saving it all is just not economical anymore, and that's why you have to classify your data.
Absolutely. So, well, I mean, this has been really, really insightful, Kevin. So, I mean, thank you so much for actually joining me today. I know it's definitely a subject that's close to both of our hearts. So, you know, I hope that the viewers have found this interesting as well, and it's given them some food for thought. But, you know, in summary, what would you say was the one thing organizations need to do today?
I guess I may sound like a broken record if you remember what a record is, but it's all
I do, unfortunately.
It's all about knowing your data and knowing it now. Don't delay.
That's brilliant. So on that note, Kevin, thank you very much, and speak soon.
Thank you.